Hey, this is just a quick disclaimer. Splatoon 3 is a much newer game from Nintendo with online components, so there's not going to be any sort of tutorial or any information to help you replicate what you see in this episode. This video is strictly for educational purposes only, and the title is available for purchase right now. Go check it out. You won't be disappointed. Hey, how's it going? If you hadn't guessed, we're going to be looking at Splatoon 3 Out of Bounds. There's all sorts of very interesting objects and textures that the player could never get a chance to see. And I got to give a big thank to Shesez TWITCH for making this tool, as well as Noe, the all-knowing, for that amazing opening animation. Links to both of them are in the video description down below, but for now, let's get started with some of the more interesting stuff that I found. Alright, to start with, let's talk about some objects and textures you can't see otherwise unless you go out of bounds. And the most interesting thing I saw, and I know a couple of people in the community already know about this, there's a jukebox that is underneath the ground in the lobby area. Now this jukebox has some primary colors, but it doesn't seem to have any actual textures to it. But you can tell that this part right here is supposed to have a glass effect, because if you take the camera inside over there, you can see that there's all sorts of wires and gears that the player was originally going to be able to see. Also really quickly, even though it's unused in Splatoon 3, it is used in Splatoon 2. Also, inside of the studio, there's one TV that has a hidden texture in it. Now, normally this TV just displays this little screensaver or whatever, but a texture that's permanently glued to the TV and is completely masked is this image that's supposed to depict what is being filmed on camera. And one of the members of the crew is holding up a sign, and it looks like they're legitimate Japanese characters, but they just don't translate to anything in specific, or anything that would make sense rather. But by consulting people online, they seem to think that although it's jumbled, it is supposed to vaguely resemble something that you could normally see in TV production in Japan. One person's best guess was that it resembles the phrase "get on with it" without actually saying "get on with it," and another is a resemblance to the phrase "set up a joke." But of course, it needs to be stated, just so that I don't get corrected in the comments, that neither of these phrases are directly translated from what's written here. And then there's this multiplayer map where there's all sorts of artwork and stuff like that being painted by some of the NPCs, one of which features a texture that cannot be seen by the player and shows an Inkling in Japanese garb. And apparently the only way you could ever see this is if you went retroactively to Splatoon 2, as this art is never shown in Splatoon 3. There's also this room over here that's a little hard to see inside of an animator at work. And I just wanted to show you a couple of the images with full clarity that are displayed on the character's desk. There's also this character way on top of a roof that's doing a canvas painting, and it would take extremely unusual means like with the Zipcaster in order to ever have a chance to see this. And also hidden in a secret room underground, you could see a couple of canvases with artwork on them that would be near impossible for the player to see. Next, I want to look at a couple of shops and give you a close look at some of the details that you can't fully explore because this is a static camera with a lot of HUD covering up a lot of the good stuff. The first of which I want to show you is in Harmony's shop, and there seems to be a flat texture of one of the ceiling lamps pressed against the wall for some reason. I have no idea why it's here. I mean, it could be that it's a light source, or I mean, it could just be a safeguard for if the camera ever pointed that way, which I don't think it does. The next shop here, where you can get accessories, has a couple of cool things to look at. This one in particular has stuff completely out of bounds, which includes a couple of untextured ceiling lights, as well as light bulb holders that normally look like this thanks to the picture provided. Anyways, if you go to this corner of the hub area, there's something that the player's not meant to see. What's cool is that the developers put something all the way at the end of this crevice to give the players a sense that they're looking at the backdrop of a billboard or something, but actually taking the camera over there can show you that that billboard is not fully modeled. It's only modeled to the extent in which it allows the player to see that crevice. And more surprising than that is that there's untextured windows and then an unused barred off door, as if the player was originally supposed to be able to get back here. And then for the second boss fight, you might think that, oh yeah, inside of one of these drawers has got to be something real good. And I can assure you that there isn't. So what's really funny about this is that underneath the map is what's hiding the real gold. And that's if you take a look here, for some reason, a whole bunch of the projectiles that the player can use in other levels of the game are all just sort of stored in this one point. And obviously you never ever get to use these bombs. Towards the end of the game, there's this tower that you can go up, and while yes, there is a cutscene later where a rocket flies through the dome, I don't think it ever shows the rocket actually breaking through the dome itself. So it's very surprising to see that on this dome texture, there is a unique breakthrough texture to sort of represent where that rocket would have blasted through. And a last minute correction, this is actually the sky dome for the lobby area of story mode after you beat the game. Of course, this footage was collected before I beat the game, so the crack in the dome shouldn't exist yet. And then we have this bridge map here, and I wanted to show you that above the playing field, the bridge is actually fully modeled. This includes road signs and dotted lines, a level of detail that is really shocking considering the fact that you don't get to see it. And then this one's pretty bizarre. Taking the camera all the way out into the ocean on this map can reveal a whole bunch of unused low poly lamps. What they're doing out here, I have no clue. But as you're gonna see throughout this episode, storing random objects way out of bounds is not a very typical thing. And so to see these out here is an anomaly. Alright, next up is Captain Cuttlefish. Before you go over into the single player campaign, you have Captain Cuttlefish hanging outside of the gutter. Taking the camera underneath the game's map will show you what it looks like from the waist down. What's funny is that from the waist up, there's also something really interesting going on with Captain Cuttlefish. For some reason, he has a fully modeled torso underneath his shirt, which is, again, not something that normally happens with character models in video games. Also, when he does an idle animation of looking left and right, his walking stick shows up with the character model for a very brief moment. And over here we have a sea snail with sunglasses on, combined with the baseball cap that is definitely my style, but when you get past the sunglasses, his face might be a little more recognizable to fans of Vine Sauce, as he seems to have a pair of lips and also teeny tiny squinty eyes. Also, speaking of eyes, if you take the camera past Shiver's peekaboo, you can see that the character has a symmetrical eye and eyebrow on the opposite side. And the next one here is a viewer request. As always, you can follow me on Twitter if you're interested in providing a viewer request for the next episode, or you can just see what's new with me and my future plans. Anyways, taking the camera into the Octarians can show you that they do have eyes underneath the goggles, the color of those eyes being purple with a green outline on the edges. And then the minion-looking Sheldon has a couple of secrets of his own. Taking the camera inside of his goggles will show you that there is a white cylinder that may be part of his design, but regardless, it's incredibly difficult to see if that is the case. Also, on the back of his shop are a couple of unique textures, like for example, a squid in a rocking chair, as well as a newspaper print that seems to have a couple of the gang going hunting or something. Also wanted to show you more of the set from the studio. Again, looking around with the character camera doesn't reveal too much. By taking the camera over here, you can see that the set design is all 2D flat cardboard textures. And then even further beyond that is a screen that I'm assuming is supposed to represent the sky. One of the cool things about the shops is that if you press L or R, you can cycle through all the shops that are in the game. And it all happens so fast, like it's almost immediate. So I wanted to pan the camera out and show you what it looks like when these shops are being transitioned out. And probably one of the most surprising things is that it's just spinning around in order to get you to where you need to be. The character stays in place. The entire environment just does a whole do-si-do. Anyways, moving on to this multiplayer map with the monorails, there's a point in time where you can't see the monorails track anymore. And if you could, you'd see that the monorails do some really funky stuff. They still go on a track, it's just that track doesn't exist, and it also defies normal logic. Usually in game development, either something despawns or it straight up teleports to another area of the map. That's the most common. But here, we're seeing that these things are designed to just go onto the other track at the same speed that it was going at before. And this one's really fun. Anyone that started the game in Splatoon 3 knows that there's this really quick scene with your main character on the train itself. And if we pan the camera out, we can see that there isn't that much to the train. In fact, there's no rails or anything. And here's a fun little fact about Sheldon. When you switch between the different shops, Sheldon starts off inside of his shell. And if we take the camera underneath, we can see that the character model for Sheldon does exist. It's just shrunk down to a teeny tiny size. And once again, by putting it in slow motion, I could show you the model growing into its shape to pull off the illusion that he's just coming out of his shell. Also, the hub area occasionally has a plane that's flying overhead. I just wanted to take the camera right up to it so that you could see all the details of it. But way more exciting than that is that towards the end of the game, there's this whole cutscene that plays out where you assemble the three parts to make the ship. And if we pan the camera out during that cutscene, you can see that it's trapped inside of a blue half-shaped dome, and that some of the after effects that are in the background are just flat and just stuck inside that half dome. Also, when the match is over in a multiplayer map, it'll go to this overhead view. But one of the cool little truths about this is that the game takes the camera above the map and then takes a snapshot of it. And that snapshot just becomes the still image that's in the background. And the proof of this is when they show the victors of the game. See, when you turn the camera over to the front of their view, you could still see the map fully loaded in, which means that the map is in a different area than you think it would be. And what you're actually looking at is pretty much the new sky texture. Also, just for fun, I wanted to take the camera inside of one of the furry models to show you just how they pull off that furry effect. And in truth, it's just a bunch of flat textures that are jettisoned out in different parts of the geometry, which, by the way, is really impressive. You can see how it's all triangulated and how often it's actually used to pull this sort of thing off. Also, just wanted to show you what it looks like when Octavius is standing inside of his mech, what his standing pose looks like, which it seems to be more like he's hovering inside there instead of standing. I had a freaking blast, you guys. Look, if you need more Out of Bounds content for Splatoon, I made one years ago for the first game. Definitely check it out. I'm going to have it on the screen here. So I'll have it on the screen, and also if you happen to miss it, it's going to be in the video description down below as well. Really quick, also, I just want to say thank you to DM, who also did a lot of fact checking for this episode, so we don't have to hear as many comments of you guys making small corrections. Thanks, DM. Appreciate that.